Don't we always have to do the yo?
Yo!
Whoa! I was so confused what you meant.
Hey, Kashak, did you know that for a long period of time, every one of Houdini's magic acts involved a trapdoor?
I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah, it was a stage he was going through.
Mm-hmm. You're not going to break me. We're not having an actual session. No, you're not going to break me with your puns. I will not. Look, I'm here to give you content. I'm not going to give you free content like it. You got to work for it. Don't you laugh for it. I can hear you.
Hi.
I can hear you laughing. Ah.
I don't hide that I'm laughing at these jokes.
No, I know, because it is literally every single one of my D&D players' jobs to try to break me. Why? What have I done?
Because we're so good at it.
I'm gonna. Never mind. No. I'm not gonna dictate the response. Never mind.
So, hi.
Hi.
How's everyone doing? I am live, obviously, and stuff. And you're already live, and like everyone's live, and it's all cool, and we're all having fun. And that's what's important.
Oh. I don't go live.
Kashak's like, what? Imagine streaming. What'd that be like?
No, imagine that. You know, I streamed for an hour yesterday. I did my weekly stream. I did. You know, an hour's fine. An hour's fine.
So. I wanted to talk about. Well, I mean, this is actually Kashak's plan, so I should just shut up and let Kashak take the lead. Kashak, what are we talking about?
So, folks, as we all can tell, normally here when you can see me on friggin'... Oh.
So, huh? I just had a redeem of a thing that I don't actually have set up yet, so I don't know why it's enabled.
Oh.
I'm sorry. I'll refund that as soon as I can.
No, don't refund it. I'll do the text-to-speech, because I see it.
Alright, Jade, as your DM, you must do it in a very suave and narrating voice.
Have you heard the condition that prevents you from sleeping, but instead makes you eat all the time? It's called insomnomnomnomnomia. Was that suave enough? Did I do suave?
Very.
Did I do a good job?
I'm giving Jade inspiration for her stream right now.
And let's talk about inspirations, because that's a fantastic segue into actually talking about something instead of just mucking about.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. So we get TTRPGs and then completely get rid of my regular campaign. Go. So let's go. Down the derailment. Go ahead, Jade.
Oh, no. Go ahead. I just saw an opportunity.
No. Look, we constantly get derailed. Let's just go down the derailment. Let's just go down the road. It's normal, you know?
Okay, sounds good. What are we talking about? I'm confused.
Okay. ADHD and D.
Woo! Oh, hold on. I gotta write that in my TikTok scripts ideas. That's a fantastic one.
You let me know, and I'll continue my thought process. I may or may not have written bits of paragraph and notes again.
What do your brain thinks? So,
folks, as you usually can tell, when I usually join Sprig and Jade on a Friday night for when it comes to Dungeons & Dragons, we usually play the Dread Throne campaign. However, tonight, due to outside sources, some of the players could not show up today, so we have decided to postpone till who knows when. Hopefully 2 weeks on normal game time.
Yeah.
But life happens. So in order to make up for cancellation again, I've decided that let's invite my two Kobold friends here, Jade the Kobold, Kobold Sprig. Go check them out. She's just saying. And I wanted to get some insight from them because normally I'm DMing them. However, I've never had them DM me. So I wanted to pick their brains to try to get some ideas. So I had a couple topics I wanted to talk about tonight. I know, Craig, you said you normally talk about homebrew, which I would love to hear about your homebrew stuff and whatnot, and especially the system that you've been working on. And Jade, you've been playing tabletop games a lot longer than I have, so I wanted to pick your brain on your wisdom and your experience that you've got. That's not what I was saying.
It's true though. I mean, I literally have been playing TTRPGs for longer than some of our viewers have been alive. Which Yeah,
That
it's true. It's
well,
not that old. I'm only 120.
I mean, Cole lived to 180.
Kobolds live indefinitely.
Oh, true. We're like elves, but we're better.
Kobolds have draconic blood. One of the core functions of draconic blood is the implication that there is no terminal age limit, as age does not yield decrepitation, rather than it just yields more experience and the same body over time. That's one of the core things about what dragon blood is in the D&D setting. So kobolds, being of draconic blood, have no upper age limit. They have an expected how long they live. They have an average of how long they live, because it's not like an ancient dragon. But even some creatures in the D&D books, like the dragon turtle that actually technically has draconic blood, have no upper age limit and will keep on growing indefinitely.
That means when I get older, I'm going to keep acting like I was in my 20s.
To be fair, it's working for me.
There are like different rules for different worlds, because D&D
True.
is a like broad and bizarre place.
So I just wanted to lure dump that because I find that's very interesting personally.
So, Sprig, you were bringing up your system and whatnot very quickly. So before we segue into the talking points that I want to hit, why don't we go through some of the stuff that you have to offer and whatnot? Give a little bit of a.
That might take a little bit too long.
A little bit too long.
If we do mine for a short segue, it's not a short segue.
Well, I mean, okay.
This is one of my smallest homebrew documents, but it's still 18 pages.
Oh, okay then. Well, then definitely let's save that more for middle of it. All right. So I have a burning question for folks, and anyone else can feel free to chip in and whatnot. But as a DM myself, that primarily I DM more than I play. Let's be honest here, but at the same time, still playing. Either way, I'm getting over it. I'm happy to do it. Hi. Kobold bring over. I wanted to know, what are some third-party products that people use when you're DMing to help you, well, narrate the story and also come up with ideas when you're prepping? This can be like virtual tabletops, DM tools, or screens that you might have for your IRL sessions, or different PDFs. What are some tools that you use, Jade Sprig?
So I swear by using Tabletop Simulator for reasons that I've shown both of you. It gives you a 3D environment to actually craft a visually interesting and dynamic table, and I like that. It lacks any of the automation that most of the other systems have. So players actually have to look at their character sheets, which I know is like anathema to some people who are used to like Roll20 and whatnot. But I swear by the flexibility of map design that I am allowed in Tabletop Sim as a platform.
Now, I've kind of looked around on Tabletop Sim before, and I've actually, in my first like playtest of Luminon back in 2019, 2020, somewhere around then, I did use Tabletop Sim for that because it was easiest for people to use. I didn't know about Roll20 at the time, and also we didn't have other virtual tabletops such as Foundry, the new 1D&D one coming out, but let's be honest, I don't think anyone's going to be using that. I know there's a couple, I think there's a couple other VTTs that I've been looking into, like Multiverse. Not that's a game. One More Universe.
Yeah.
That's like a pixel. I remember seeing that, like, oh, that might be cool for automation and whatnot, and for storytelling for like Humblewood, which I still have PDFs for. But
It's also got like cool character creation tools, and there's a lot of stuff to it that's really neat.
And I still gonna be looking at that. But nowadays, Jade and whatnot, using Tabletop Sim, because the Steam Workshop is amazing. Like, there's a bunch of different creators on there, creating free 3D models, free assets for anyone to use. Or if you're your own self-modeling, it's free to put up. How does the Steam Workshop and community for Tabletop Simulator compare to newer stuff like that, such as automation, like Dungeon Alchemist or something like that, that can be used right off the bat for beginner friendly? Do you know what Dungeon Alchemist is, Jade?
Nope.
Well, then I'll direct this question over to Spring because I know you played around with the Dungeon Alchemist.
I actually highly recommend Dungeon Alchemist for if you have a difficulty making. Unfortunately, you can't export it as 3D yet, as far as I'm aware. But it is a very fantastic tool for making like small-scale battle maps very fast. Like, because it has a system to automatically populate any room that you make, and like automatically sets in walls and doors and that kind of thing. You basically just assemble a grid on a grid like, I want these rooms, these hallways, yada yada. And you can make a dungeon. Like that. Or you can like brush sculpt terrain and put in trees and foliage and stuff and make a wooded path. Or you can make a house or a castle or whatever different things you want to do. There's a lot to it that you can do, and they also added workshop support to that one too, so you can actually like download and borrow or upload and share anything that you make with it as well.
I see. So almost is it almost to the degree of Tabletop Simulator? I mean, Tabletop Simulator is more dedicated for actual tabletop gaming, but for the community itself with free assets, stuff like that.
It doesn't have assets, unfortunately, that you can get through Steam Workshop. It's just like sharing what can be made in the system already.
So, like, just different maps and whatnot?
I think they have plans to open it up to modding, but they're not there yet.
Gotcha. So, and...
But as far as the programming goes, if it's on sale or you have I think it's like $40 or $50 right now, and you like struggle with making battle maps for your Foundry game or your Roll20 game, when you make something in Dungeon Alchemist, there's a one-button export basically, and then you can import it into Roll20 or Foundry within a minute, like inside 60 seconds. It's so fast.
See. So, and do you think, for someone who's newer to DMing, would you recommend if they're more creative to go with Dungeon Alchemist, or would you recommend more going towards the hands-on manual that is Tabletop Simulator?
It depends on your group, and it depends on your DMing style, I think, heavily.
Alright, that makes sense. Yeah.
So, like, some players, I have a couple players in my game, for example, who are very visual. Like, I have to have the thing that they want to see, either a picture of it to share so they can get a mental image, or like the four walls of the room. I have to provide that so that they can like fully experience the room and the setting. And for a group like that, I don't think Tabletop Simulator is generally as good, because you can't quite get exactly what you want all the time.
Okay.
But for groups that are more fast and loose and that are comfortable with their imagination over like their visual perception, then Tabletop Sim works fantastically. It's not as much a this is better, this is worse. It's a this is better for these people.
Right, and that's going to be true in pretty much anything that we discuss. It's going to be about what's best for your party, because everything's situational.
My one exception to that rule is Foundry over Roll20. Foundry is like, it's a little bit fussier sometimes about like updating. Sometimes I lose session for a couple of weeks on an update because it breaks something. But like, Foundry is one-time payment for one person. Roll20 is monthly payment for one person to be able to run a campaign long-term.
I can speak to that as someone who hosts his games on Roll20.
And Foundry,
skill issue?
Instead of being like a whole thing that you have to spend an evening with an expert on installing plugins and then like having a manual on the side for how to use your plugins that you added, Foundry just has one-click installs that add the whole like, user interface and everything to every plugin you add.
Nice.
No. Now,
Now,
oh, sorry, Jade, go ahead.
I just want to say that a- right just between the three of us, we have a lot of very different experience with Dungeons and/or Dragons, and that's going to heavily color all of our advice. My experience, like speaking in the comment, if you have players that aren't as much into acting and imagination, which is strange to me because that's like the core of D&D for me, because I mostly.
I do want to specify. It's not like a down of their acting or like a lack of imagination. It's just that they require visual aid.
Mm-hmm.
They just haven't really. Do you think that's more because of them as a person, or they haven't trained their muscle and the mind?
It's just how their brain works. Like
Okay.
they need at least like the four walls, the outline of what's there, and then they can fill in gaps themselves. But like a description of four walls for the room, they can't mentally keep track of where everything is.
Okay, so it's kind of like going back to that whole like using assets or using a grid or using theater of the mind and whatnot.
Yeah, pretty much. They need the grid rather than theater of the mind. Is
Okay.
basically what it comes down to.
Do you have a preference, Jade? Do you prefer theater of the mind or grid? Just working well around that.
So, I like for the roleplay sections to be theater of the mind, and I like combat sections to be grid. I think that for roleplay sections, you don't need a grid, you don't need a map, you don't need anything. You just need people who are talking to each other and describing actions or doing actions, and acting and improvising off of each other as prompts. The DM only needs to step in if there's something if there's a question, or if there's a question about the world that needs to be answered, or if there's a check that needs to be made that isn't just assumed to succeed. In my brain mind, you don't need anything for most roleplay sessions. But combat, but encounters, I shouldn't just say combat when I actually mean encounters as a more general phrase. Encounters are different in my mind brain, because encounters are a game. You have the acting and improv section, and then you have combat, which is I'm going to do a bunch of cool stuff and backflips until the enemy falls over. And those are separate for me. Those are sort of naturally segmented apart from each other.
Okay.
And
definitely too. Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry. And
No.
I enjoy systems where the combat is fun on its own. Right? A good combat system in a tabletop RPG is something that is made better by story and background and plot, but doesn't it even require it? Something that you could just toss down some models on the table and play to have fun. So a good example of this in the video game world would be Divinity: Original Sin 1 and 2.
Yes.
Both those games have such a fun combat system. You could just play a combat encounter and have a good time, but it's made so much more by having the rest of the system. And that's why 4th edition is the best tabletop RPG system, is because it has straight up the most balanced and fun encounter system, and it doesn't restrict you in a theater of the mind style of open roleplay. It had to happen. You knew it was going to happen. There's no way.
Yeah.
No, but genuinely though, that there is, memes aside, I don't have as much pleasure in combat systems that aren't interesting. I think Vampire is a good example of a combat system that's just not really interesting to me. I don't feel like the combat system does much.
Ooh.
But White Wolf has some very phenomenal mechanics for interpersonal relationships, active role-playing, world-building. I'm not saying the system's bad. I think the combat in the system is bad. And I mean that like purely in a demonstrable way in terms of what you're allowed to do and how the mechanics are flowed together. But the system is still a good system for what it does. I I would just say that the world doesn't need the system as much as the combat requires it.
I tend to agree. Now, I'm a big fan of World of Darkness, Vampire the Masquerade. I haven't played
Mm-hmm.
Hunter or I haven't played Werewolf, something like that. I've played one game so far of Vampire the Masquerade, but I've watched a lot of it, and I have to tend to agree because I've watched a couple different storytellers because that's their Dungeons and Masters, what they call storyteller. A lot of them are coming from like Pathfinder, Dungeons and Dragons, which the combat is built into part of that, where it's turn-based. Whereas in Vampire, it's not turn-based, right? It's basically, okay, cool. Who has the higher speed? But in itself, who has a higher speed kind of makes it turn-based. So, do you think if we're going to touch upon Vampire, do you think there's a way for the storyteller to implement some form of like initiative system, like from Pathfinder or from Dungeons and Dragons, to apply it to Vampire? Or do you think that would just kind of ruin the whole storytelling aspect of it? Because Vampire is built on just storytelling and improv. I mean, generally that's TTRPGs, but with no constructive combat rules, that is.
If you're doing that much already, you are effectively rebuilding the system. At that point, why are you using the same system? If you have a combat-focused game, step out of White Wolf, because White Wolf is not a combat-focused system. It's not made to be that. It's not supposed to be that. If your game is reliant, if you have a combat encounter every session, then why are you playing on a White Wolf system, right?
Yeah. Okay.
And the flip side is true, of course. If you're playing, a game that's entirely focused on role playing, then why would you be playing? Then there are better systems out there than D&D or what's another good example of a combat focused one? Like it's yeah.
That makes sense. We touched upon Vampire, so I kind of wanted to ask about that.
Yeah.
No, that's a fun system, but definitely not for the faint of heart. That's for sure. But I think that
I've played Masquerade. The longest running campaign I was Dark Ages. I've played Changeling. I've played a Changeling character in a vampire game, which was the worst experience. One of my worst experiences on tabletop. Just because the power scaling was so different for those two. And yeah, White Wolf systems don't necessarily. White Wolf systems claim to mix and match, but they don't actually. It's a lie.
Well, I think this is actually a pretty good segue. You want to touch on different system diversity and whatnot, Jade.
Mm-hmm.
And we're kind of already touching upon that now, and we'll get back to TMs and whatnot, but now I'm curious and whatnot. Now, as someone who's been running Pathfinder 2e, right?
Mm-hmm.
How have you been enjoying that compared to like running Dungeons and Dragons from the past?
Honestly, it's not appreciably different enough. The differences that it has, I enjoy. I think the 3-action economy is more flexible than D&D's action economy. I think you can do more neat things with it. I think that the skills and abilities are more interesting than what I've seen in 5e, but not as interesting as what you can have in Lancer or 4th edition. I feel like it's different from D&D, but not different enough to really convince me on it. I think it's enjoyable, and I plan on continuing it and learning this to be better. But it's not as good as I'd hoped. It's not bad, and in some ways it's an improvement, and in some ways it's held back slightly by its handling, and it's absolutely crippled by its terminology in the book. But
Yes.
it really is. But the system itself is fun. It's just almost as generic as D&D, and that's not a compliment.
And
I think the big thing for me with like Pathfinder 2, from what I've played of it so far, is in most senses it is as simple as D&D 5th edition.
Mm-hmm.
Except there is no learning curve. There is a learning wall.
Hmm.
like, instead of it being approachable and being able to read through the player's handbook and understand what you're doing in one pass, Pathfinder is kind of just like, okay, whoa, feats! Stop! It's feats time!
Half of everything that you can do on your character is labeled as a feat, and that is definitely a choice.
Because so many things are feats, it restricts what's not a feat. So, like, you can't predict the weather without a feat for predicting the weather. So it's difficult for a character to be, like, well-rounded in any skills at all at first level, because you need feats for every skill.
Which goes back into the theater of the mind thing where, you know, if the player says they can do something and it's reasonable for that player to do it, I don't care if there's a feat involved. I'm going to say, okay, cool, go for it. The fact that it's one of those situations where having more options in the system can detract from what the players can do. Because exactly as Sprig says, there's a feat for being able to track weather. Cool. Does that mean that you can't track weather without the feat? If they didn't have a feat for being able to predict the weather, then you could assume reasonably that anybody who has paying attention to the weather is able to do it. But the fact that the feat exists kind of pushes the DM's hand in saying, well, if this feat exists, can the players do it without the feat? You see what I'm saying?
I see what you're saying.
Sparks. Every single feat in Pathfinder sparks, well, not every single, but a lot of the feats in Pathfinder spark a rules lawyer conversation that doesn't need to be there.
And
like,
a lot of that is reminiscent
one of the
of...
ones that drove me crazy was with this feat, you can craft flint and steel from components.
Yeah.
It's flint and steel!
It's already crafted. It's flint and steel. Like, if you have the components, you've already crafted it.
That's definitely something. So, do you think? So, I'm after hearing what you guys are kind of saying right there. It seems to me that, like, if you're more creative and more like imaginative, like a system like Dungeons & Dragons 5e. Now, these are pretty much the same system, but seems how Dungeons & Dragons 5e is more open-minded on its rules, whereas rules are written or rules as intended. More creative people might flock towards D&D 5e because it's less stuff. However, more people who are more analytical and want something follow like very heavy rules would more gravitate towards Pathfinder 2e. Is that a fair assessment for like DMing?
That's what I've seen as a trend for like people in my community, for example, on my streams, is a lot of people who like playing crunchy systems love Pathfinder 2nd edition and hate D&D 5th edition, and vice versa. I love fluffy systems and hate crunchy systems. I loved D&D 5th edition, mostly because there were so many gaps in it, I could fill them in with whatever I want.
Cough, cough, put a portal on a tree and then push someone three times before anyone falling 180 feet.
And a lot of that goes to what Pathfinder's trying to do, right? Pathfinder First Edition was a lash out at D&D 4th Edition, which I could go into more detail on, but I don't think I need to right now. But I will later, undoubtedly. But Pathfinder was literally advertising itself as D&D 3.75, and one of the core problems with D&D 3rd Edition, and 3.5 by extension, of course, is a fundamental inundation, an overwhelming number of rules, right? That system had more bloat than any other tabletop RPG in history. Past, present, and likely future, because now we get having less time in between editions, which is a separate discussion, I think, though maybe it shouldn't be. Both for consoles and for tabletop RPG systems, companies are pushing out more editions faster because, well, money, capitalism, late-stage capitalism, ahoy. But that idea of D&D 3.5 was so much bloat, so much rules. And the people who liked that are the target audience for Pathfinder 1st Edition. I hate Pathfinder 1st Edition. I've made no secret of this. Second edition, I don't think is that bad. I think it does some cool stuff. Like we were discussing, but it's still targeting the audience that wants there to be too many rules. And theater of the mind, I firmly believe that you don't need dice to play an RPG. I firmly believe that you have 3 people who can sit down and talk, can make a RPG. You know, I would argue that Whose Line Is It Anyways is an RPG system. It's a GM giving prompts and people doing improv in character. What's different from that from an RPG system, eh?
Actually, we were talking with Big Heart earlier. He actually ran an RPG in high school. He's told me about a couple of times, but they didn't use dice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it was just
absolutely.
a thing they did every day.
Yeah, as long as you have a strong social contract between players, if not, no one's going to do anything that's, you know, unfair, and everyone's going to be doing something that forwards the plot as opposed to stealing spotlight, which is not an easy thing to do. And I learned D&D with actors, right? I learned D&D, tabletop RPGs in general, at college, where I got an acting degree. So my player base was people who were, you know, playing a character and were more focused on making sure that the story is interesting and entertaining for everyone who's sitting at the table, rather than I must have the strongest character, or I have something that the DM's throwing at me that I have to overcome. It's the DM's throwing something at me, I want to make sure this is interesting, which is the mindset that I see streamers having, which is why I love playing with streamers. I mean, we're all actors at the end of the day, right?
I mean, we're all VTubers, so technically we're playing character.
I know my approach when I'm playing in RPGs is usually, how can I solve this problem with the random junk at my disposal?
Which is fascinating and something that I love about your playstyle, frankly. And Kashak, I think you're the only one of us that actually really streams in character. My character is basically me, and Sprig is basically just her.
Yep.
No,
I remember I called you out that one time.
No, so actually, I guess to touch upon that very quickly, right? Kashak is a part of who I am, and I am Kashak. I made him with me in mind. However, I did also leave elements that are character-like. Well, more the voice. I don't really try to talk in a nasally voice when I'm playing in character. That being said, you know, I think Sprig is the only one who's actually seen Kashak as a character during a couple one-shots that I couldn't finish with her.
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't really been able to show that off when I play, such as like in my Pathfinder game every other Thursday night, or my Wednesday game, because those aren't streamed. Hopefully one day I can show the more character side of Kashak. But I am actually generally, when I'm streaming, there's some elements there that are character, but most of it is myself.
Did anybody ever clip that moment where I called you out on that? Because that was real funny. We were talking before you went live, and then you went live, and you would immediately switch into your Kashak voice, and I'm like, dude, what the heck?
That's my streamer voice. I mean, like, what do you want from me, huh?
I'm like, what are you doing? You're trying too hard.
Not trying too hard. This actually just comes natural when I'm. Well, if I'm going to be Kashak,
it was just a funny moment. I am sorry for that, but it was a funny moment.
No, it was a funny moment.
No, for
you're
me,
absolutely right.
For me, I use character stuff to cover questions that I'm not comfortable answering about myself IRL. That's basically what my character exists for. Is, you know, oh, what do you think about this? I'll give my honest opinion. What do you do here? I'll give my honest, you know, self. I am, you know, genuine. Oh, where do you live? I live in a comfy cave in the middle of the mountains. It's like, it's there for when how old are you? Oh, I'm 120 years old. It's when someone asks me a question that I don't want to answer in, you know, IRL stuff. That's when I shift over and give a character answer. That's pretty much all I use it for, frankly.
I should get into the same habit because, like, I don't even do that. I slightly relax on, like, my pronunciation a little bit, and that's pretty much all I do when I'm streaming. Cause, like, this is basically just me, but, like, and the boobs. The boobs is the thing that I use a character bit. But,
of course.
Like,
I think it's...
To try and be a little bit more serious for a second, this is more or less how I talk normally. It's not a, like, big difference. you'll usually notice it around like L's and S's and R's.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah.
my tongue is too big for my mouth, and it's very hard for me to talk normally.
Yeah, for me, when I'm not streaming, I tend to talk a little bit more feminine, and there's something like this. But like aside from that, it's just me. I'm just me. Hi, I'm me. But anyways,
we appreciate you.
but like all this to say, hi. The summary of this is just gaming good. The summary of this is to say that you don't need a system to roleplay, and the people who want every single rule in existence can have it, but I don't think they're actually gaining as much as they think they are. One example I gave, this was an example I gave a lot when it was, when the 3.5 versus 4th edition discussion was at its peak, which was not a great time to be on Tabletop Gamer because there was a lot of bad takes everywhere. And it's like, what do you do if you want to be a blacksmith in 3.5? Well, you have to have a certain strength. You have to have a strength, I believe, and constitution, maybe? And I think it was just strength of 13. You need to take this feat. Then you need to take this other feat at some point if you want to craft anything magical. And then you have the... And it's like, what do you do if you want to be a blacksmith in 4th edition? You say, hey, GM, I want to craft this because I'm a blacksmith. Cool. Wait, you're a wizard. Yeah, I want to craft it using magic. Is that cool? That's awesome. That was the conversation, and that's a completely different conversation, and it begs a different player, right? There are players who want to say, I'm a blacksmith because the paper says I'm a blacksmith, instead of I'm a blacksmith because I think it would be interesting for my character to be a blacksmith. And that's two different mindsets. And I'm not saying one's better than the other, but one absolutely is.
I am a weird-ish player. I am, just to be on that subject, is I kind of like to play both sides of that coin sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
In the, like, JD, I've walked you through my character creation process before.
Yeah.
I like looking at a picture and going, this is my character, and then filling in all the gaps around that character, and then role-playing my character with the mechanical rules that I decided felt like they fit that character the most.
Mm-hmm. And I've done mechanics first characters too, but they're a lot of fun. But usually when I'm doing mechanics first characters, it's in more combat focused games. It's in games that I know are going to be very encounter heavy. I've actually had more encounters in my Pathfinder game than normal, simply because I wanted to play with this. I wanted to see the system. I wanted to see the system in those encounters, so I could get used to it. But I've had more encounters in that game than my jamming style usually has. But yeah, that's my take on different systems. And like, just to shout out a couple of systems. If you're playing with people IRL and you have a horror game, look at Dread. I want to tell you the rules of Dread real quick. Okay? Dread is for horror games. It's a horror game system. You have a Jenga tower. Straight up, just a straight up Jenga tower. And anytime that you want to do an action, you need to play a round of Jenga. Anytime you need a check, it's you have to pull a piece out and put it on top, which is inherently a tense atmosphere, right? That's something that is automatically scary, right?
It's also an interesting choice that a horror game where you're likely going to have shaky hands, they get you to play a game where you have to have a steady hand.
Exactly. And if you want, at any time, any player can shove the tower. If you are taking an action and you don't have a good chorus, but you have something very cool or important or critical, or you don't think that you have any other pathway on the tower, you knock it over. You are guaranteed to succeed that action, but your character dies at the end of the action, and you get to decide how. Which I think is very cool, frankly. I think that's a really interesting dynamic. It's only for horror games where...
Something that would be super cool for like a one-shot night.
Right, it's for games where your character is expendable. It's designed for horror games that are lethal, and system lethality is actually something I wanted to talk about as well. But this idea that, of how lethal should a system be, And I mean, obviously the answer is it depends on the player base. It depends on who's doing what, right? You know, depends on what the players want. But some systems are more lethal than others, and that's something I don't think we discuss often enough.
Now,
I think a modular lethality is best.
what do you mean by modular lethality, if you don't mind me asking?
So an example of that is like D&D 5th edition,
Mhm.
just to name one example. Because I've run a few different games, I've played in a few different games, I've run a couple of games, and I've had various rules on how to make the game more or less lethal. You want the game to be less lethal? Add Constitution modifier to death saves.
And if you want it to be more lethal?
If you want to be more lethal, death saves don't fall off until you complete a long rest.
Ooh, nice. Yeah, that's fair.
Wait, doesn't that
you
normally?
want it to be slightly you have to do fresh 3 death saves every single time you go down.
Mm-hmm.
But if you set
Oh,
it
I've
up
been doing that wrong.
and run it instead where failures don't reset until you complete a long rest, you're running much more lethal.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you run what I do, for example, slightly less lethal than that, but still very dangerous, is every time that you go down, gain a rank of exhaustion.
Ooh, that makes sense. It just makes sense, actually.
What? I may have misunderstood the rules on that the entire time, and I've been just doing like, oh yes, you have to take a long rest before you get any of those off either way. So apparently my games are just lethal by nature. But it doesn't really matter because you guys, the way you guys play, I can never get you guys down anyways.
So that gained exhaustion, for example, though, if you have 6 ranks of exhaustion, you just die outright and you only restore 1 at the end of a long rest.
Mhm.
So if you go down more than once, it's just as bad or worse than the death saves don't fall off.
Mm-hmm.
So like having a system that is easily adjusted to change how deadly it is, I think is a very good feature. Something like Pathfinder 1 or 3.5 where it's like, oh, you go to negative 10 hit points, you're dead, period.
Mm-hmm.
Adjusting the amount of negative makes it less lethal, but like going to 0 is still really, really rough.
Yeah, and frankly, like, what was I gonna say? Dang it, I lost it, my track. Never mind, disregard. Stuff.
Or I don't remember the rules very clearly because I didn't play enough of it and it's been a few years now. In Mutants and Masterminds, you don't even have the hit points to track damage, it's just status effects.
Okay. That's an interesting take. I know there's like a whole debate.
As for Riddle's quick question, just to address it really quick, how 5e handles gratuitous overkill is if you go to negative hit points equal to your max hit points in a single hit, dead. Period.
Just straight up dead. And that doesn't normally happen past like level 5 or anything, unless your DM is literally trying, oh hey, you annoyed me during the week. Yeah, here's a lesson.
Oh, it happened once to my wizard on my Tuesday campaign at like level 10.
Okay, well, being a wizard with a D6, yeah, that's...
He got crit with a sneak attack from behind as well, so like, it was pretty bad. But he literally gained 0 hit points the day before, like the session before when they leveled up, so I adjusted for that.
You gain 0 hit points?
Yeah, but if you have a negative con mod and you roll a 1 on your D6, 0 hit points. He's currently level 12 with like 38 hit points.
Oh gosh. Alright, well, folks, see, a wizard like that, all you have to do is get a couple sneaky kobolds in a trench coat, and bam, that wizard is no longer, and you know, and look at that, all the kobolds get knowledge at that point. Well, I'm surprised, Sprig, about 38 at level 12. That is definitely very low.
He's hard committed to the bit of rolling d6 for his hit points every level, and he does not roll well for them.
Oh no.
That's amazing. So, I guess going back to your dread thing, Jade, when you were talking about that, I remember just hearing about something called the Dread Tower for older editions of D&D. So did they literally just take that whole Dread thing from the system Dread and just put it into D&D for like
Yep.
maybe old school Ravenloft stuff?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, and that's also another good thing
I
about
think-
system diversity. Oh.
Sorry, I just want to say, I think that actually came first, and then Dread they decided to make an entire the system around that concept, of sort of spinning it off to say, hey, but what if we made this was just the core of something? I could be wrong about that. I actually don't know the timeline.
Mhm.
But yes, short version is yes.
So that's also another good thing about why people who are tabletop RPG players, if you're an avid tabletop RPG player, like if you're just getting into the thing, stick to one system. That way, make sure you even like playing a tabletop role-playing game. But for people who've been playing, Dungeons and Dragons for 5+ years, 2+ years, anyways, definitely check out other systems because you can find rules that in those systems that you can try to adapt. See something like Dungeons and Dragons 5e that is very open with the rules that you have a bunch of different homebrew stuff. Like, I mean, I have a bunch of different homebrew stuff that I use that I've found from other systems and whatnot. For example, for my Grim Hollow games, which I hope to get the two of you into a Grim Hollow game one day, but we'll see. Is I take a little bit of inspiration from Darkest Dungeon. Now, that's not a tabletop game at all, but the whole like stress mechanic and whatnot.
Actually, on that note, there is actually a 5e homebrew that I read a while back.
The Darker Dungeons.
Yes, Giviglyph's Darker Dungeons, which is also based on Darkest Dungeon.
We've played that system before. After I tried implementing the stress system and whatnot. You can take inspiration from other mediums of media, video games, stories, and whatnot.
Also, a big thing that I have to suggest: don't be afraid to homebrew.
As the queen of homebrew herself.
So, my experience with D&D, I grew up with making D&D. That was always what I imagined D&D as. So like I've shared a little bit of my experience of D&D with you guys a few times now, but like the jobs that we give to the players that we do in Kashak's campaign, for example. That was something that I've always done. Like, it was just always part of the campaigns that I played in. Every player keeps track of one thing in the notes to make sure that it's somewhere written down, additional to the DM's own notes. Just so that you can help alleviate the load a little bit. But also,
It's a good idea.
I played in a game, I remember, I mentioned a few times, I think. We played in a campaign that had 5 sessions a week. Of those 5 sessions a week, we would usually have one session that was just like shopping and roleplay and terrain building. We would be roleplaying and we would be building set pieces together at the table. So like sculpting a road or building lamp posts or fences or whatever different things, props to use for our table. And role-playing and shopping at the same time. And the DM would run 2 sessions that week, and then the players would run 2 sessions that week.
That's
So
quite
the
a lot.
players would write a one-shot, and we'd host the one-shot, and then that one-shot would be incorporated into the world's lore, and would become canon for the campaign.
Wow, that's a lot of D&D in a week.
Mind you, the players of my first campaign, that I've mentioned a few times too, they taught me English. They were a bunch of retirees.
Oh, they had plenty of time.
Yeah, this was just what they did to fill the time, because none of them really liked watching movies or TV that much. Except my DM was like obsessed with Jackie Chan movies and insisted that was D&D homework.
All right, what was your
Nice.
DM's favorite Jackie Chan movie? Very quick. Now I'm curious.
His favorite movie. I think it was Rumble in the Bronx was his favorite.
I don't think I've heard of that one, actually.
Mine of the ones that he got me to watch was, Who Am I?
Yeah, that's a good one.
The rooftop fight is just so good. But that was a thing that he got me to do to like get out of the mindset of in combat hit thing. That was all of the players had the same mindset of like kind of what you see me do in one shots and in campaigns and stuff that I've streamed and that I've played with you guys. Being creative and solving problems with what we happen to have at our disposal, rather than just hit thing kill monster.
That makes sense. I'm always appreciative of players who are newer that slowly start to develop. Like, oh, cool! I'm playing a fighter. I have a longsword. I'm going to go hit them with a longsword. Okay, cool. How do you hit them with a longsword and whatnot? Which
Right.
I've brought this up to people before. When they start to evolve into actually describing their action, showing that they're showing interest in your game and whatnot, it's such a feel-good feeling, especially when you're teaching newer people.
You mean when they actually start to act?
Yes.
Because that's what it is, right? That's what you're saying? It's about when the players actually become, decide they want to act in your campaign.
I always recommend for people I teach IRL, like, go watch improv for just one time. Or D&D is not... D&D in itself is sort of like improv. Now, improv and D&D have different elements for sure, but they share a lot.
Yeah, I firmly believe in that. If you're having trouble describing attacks, think about it beforehand, Like, read more books is the first thing. I mean, not to be crass about it, but if you are having trouble figuring out how to describe a cool attack, you should probably pick up a book or two and start seeing how professional authors do it. But aside from that, think about it before your turn comes around, Maybe you have to adjust it, maybe you have to adapt it, but what's a cool thing I can do, Can I throw my axe at the enemy and then jump in and drop kick it into their chest? Can I do a backflip and swing on a chandelier? These kind of questions are fun, frankly. And yeah.
Now to go along with that, if you're not really so much into reading, well, Dungeons and Dragons has a lot of reading to it. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, folks.
Yeah, right.
Another thing people can do, I feel like, is watch HEMA videos on like YouTube. To get them more stimulated. It's another thing. It's not as effective as reading, but for more people who are visual learners compared to, being taught. Again, it's not necessarily the same. I would, if actually, in all honesty, now I'm thinking about it, I would recommend just go play The Witcher or something like that if you want to learn how to use a longsword more. Even though The Witcher is not the moves are not accurate to like actual swordplay, but describing and whatnot.
The Witcher is like off and on. There's some stuff that's real and that's good, and then there's some stuff that's not. And if you've even heard, like, there are experts in longsword as well who talk about, yeah, swinging a longsword like this with one hand, it's not very practical, but Geralt is monstrously strong and can just take someone's head off with a one-handed swing anyway. So it works for him because it's the fantasy of the situation.
Right. As Jade, as someone who's actually done not live action, but live swordplay, do you have anything to add on that?
Oh, I have lots to add to that. Yeah. I am a trained stage combatant. I worked as a stage combat actor for several years. Most stage combat isn't realistic. So you'd be surprised at what I would cite as actually being, my teacher taught us how to actually kill somebody with a sword, and then taught us how to adapt that into for stage. That was my, that was the style, and this really fascinating. It was like, the choreography in, say, Star Wars is really interesting, completely unrealistic, but fascinating. Whereas the choreography in Princess Bride is actually extremely realistic and beautiful. Princess Bride has some of the best stage combat, and I'm not just saying that because the fight director was one of my adjudicators for my stage combat exam. And yes, I did do a scene from Princess Bride for my exam because I was definitely knew who was going to be proctoring it. Anyways, I think that if you want to get cool ideas, watching Hema, okay, sure. Watching what's the other one? SCA. It's like
SCA.
Yeah, it's like
Stage Combat Association, I'm guessing?
No, it's
Acronym? I don't know acronyms.
Is it like something like Armor Combat League?
SCA is the Society for Creative Anachronism, and it's an organization that pretends that it's doing quote unquote realistic stage combat, and they will always talk about how this is how it was actually done. It's like no, it really wasn't. It's like when people who are doing MMA start talking about how this stuff will help them in real life. It's like, cool. In real life, you don't have a octagon with mats down. You don't have a padded floor. What you're doing is not actually going to save your life in an actual combat situation.
You have an environment around you to use at your disposal.
And people. And the human element, But
yeah.
Not to say you can't learn combat techniques, but... Sorry, go ahead.
That's a big thing as to why I, as my DM before me, recommend Jackie Chan movies as a source of inspiration for role-playing combat.
And I was actually going to get around to that, and I was actually about to cycle into that. It's like, yeah, honestly, if you want to do something cool at the tabletop, if you want to do something cool in relation to that, yeah, Jackie Chan movies or Power Rangers or like those are going to be more appropriate for things to watch to learn than something that's quote unquote realistic, like Hema, or something that thinks that it's realistic, like Hema, or CA, or things like that. Is like, no, you don't want to make something that's realistic. You want to make something that's exciting. You want to be Errol Flynn, right? You want to do backflips and do amazing cool stunts. You wanted to spin a ladder around your legs and kick it down an enemy. You want to fight while walking up a staircase, and so you can. I'm gonna go back to the chandelier grab because it's hilarious and amazing. You want to be in a situation. Cool. It's one of something that's cool. Don't worry about what's realistic. If you're playing a game with elves and magic and you want to be realistic, I mean,
go play something like Middle Earth.
I don't want to say you're playing games wrong, but like, why is your priority being realistic if you're playing a fantasy game with dwarves and magic? Like, and if that's what you enjoy, then sure. But then you don't. That like my advice isn't for you, and that you just acknowledge that right out of the gate.
I suppose when I said like the Hema and whatnot, a lot of my games that I run off stream are actually more based on like that humanoid combat. There's a big element in my Saturday Grim Hollow group. However, at that point, I'm calling myself liar for the past couple months. It's literally every combat situation is now just a Yakuza game, but that's by design.
Reasonable. But yeah, I think that Jackie Chan is a fantastic example of, the kind of content the type of combat encounter that you want to encourage. And throw the rules out the window, There's two types of GMs. One will hear the player say, I want to jump up, grab the chandelier, backflip till I land behind the Duke, and then I want to stab him in the ribs. And some GMs will hear that and say, okay, I'm going to need 2 acrobatics checks, and you'll be taking an attack of opportunity. And another GM will say, cool, I'm going to give you +2 to your attack roll because that's awesome. Be the second GM. That's my advice. Be the second GM. Be the one that says, that's cool, that's bringing something more to the table, that's making things interesting. everyone likes to point to Critical Role and say that Matt Mercer is the best DM. He's great, but his table is giving him so much energy. His table is giving him so much active feedback and information, and that is incredibly valuable.
I want to hop in on that, just because I've had players who have actually quit D&D because when they come see me DM and whatnot, it's not, oh, you're not Matthew Mercer, this is not what I want, and they just go watch Critical Roles. And that's fine and whatnot, folks. Matthew Mercer is, like, idealistically, probably is a picture-perfect DM and whatnot. However, that's because they have resources, and not every DM is going to have that. So just be mindful of that coming in.
Something that I think I like to refer to Critical Role as, and just maybe some people don't like my opinion on this.
The
But
TV?
I compare it with Boku no Hero to My Hero Academia.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't do anything like spectacularly new in its genre. It's not like blowing you away with exactly what's happening. It's just got a really high production value to make what it is doing appear very good.
Mm-hmm. Which is not to say that it isn't very good, of course.
Yes, of course, it's still fun and it's still a great time to watch it and everything. But like, Matt Mercer, as much of a fantastic job as he does of being characters and like voice acting, and he does a great job writing and everything.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily the best writing and the best everything there is to be. It's just that he has such a like fantastically polished finish on it because he has a professional skill in that field, and he has the resources at his disposal to back him up, and he has a wonderful table of players.
Yeah.
The players, I have to say, like, as much as Matt Mercer is a good DM, I'm sorry, what makes Critical Role for me to watch is definitely the players. But at the same time,
I just
well, technically, I
but I haven't been able to watch the second or the third.
all right. To be fair, I don't watch it; I listen to it as a podcast. But still, they're trained professionals, and they're going to make it like the picture perfect like Hollywood vision of D&D. I feel.
Mm-hmm.
It's
not a bad thing.
It's a Marvel movie.
and that's not a bad thing. It's worth saying.
If you have the money and resources to like go and get the Dwarven Dungeon is the title that they use or something like that for the realistic and beautiful maps that he puts together. I don't know. Well, actually, I think this is a good segue. Going back into third-party stuff that you want to use. I want to discuss. We've all played IRL D&D here, right? Now we've only played online D&D because of the distance. However, what are some resources that you would like to subscribe for people for IRL D&D? Because I'm a big proponent that I feel like people should play IRL D&D once just to experience it.
Reaper miniatures, especially the Bone series. If you're playing IRL D&D, you want to have minis. And
Yes.
if you're going to have minis, if you're buying an official merchandise mini from Wizards of the Coast, from War Machine, from Warhammer, then you are paying for the game design, for the licensing, for the development costs of the RPG version of it. You are paying extra, and correctly so. You should. That's fair, because that is a cost that they incur during creating those games. But if you just want a model, Reaper Miniatures just makes models. Good casts, good products. They make, and yeah, if you're looking for a model for a game, go there.
Hero Forge isn't bad either, in that it gives you the ability to make your custom mini.
Hero Forge is very user-friendly, especially now with the painted option.
But one of the resources I'd like to recommend that maybe not so many people are familiar with, mind you that this comes from my background as someone who makes a lot of terrain and stuff too, is there's a YouTube channel called RP Archive. That's capital R, capital P, space, archive, the word. He has a fantastic series of creating modular tile pieces out of foam and other relatively cheap materials, and has like a full build list, and he deliberately does everything he can to cut cost and make it affordable and approachable for new players.
Mm-hmm.
I want to hop on that. A personal channel that I watch for stuff like that is Black Magic Craft on YouTube. Now
Craft is also quite good.
he does do like dollar store builds and whatnot, but he's definitely more like if you're middle of the road between Dwarven Dungeon and doing everything with foam. But his pieces look amazing.
Yes.
Be right back, 1 sec.
Now, so when Jade gets
green stuff can be used to MacGyver your own stuff, Riddle, but it's definitely a skill set to build. What I would probably do before that, even as someone who's new, is I would probably use plasticine, like just cheap dollar store clay, just because it's got a longer workable life. And then once it's finished, then you give that a solid coat. So you can like put your base coat paint down, layer your paints on top, and then do a matte finish spray to seal it. Before I would use green stuff.
now this is my ignorance. What's green stuff?
Green stuff is an epoxy clay. It's a blue and a green that you mix together, and it gives you a couple hours of workability before it turns like rock solid.
Okay.
Sculpting it is very difficult if you're not experienced, and you have to do it in like tiny pieces at a time.
Okay.
So like sculpting
Greens-
a full figure out of green stuff is very difficult.
I think green stuff is phenomenal for making modifications to an existing figure.
Yes.
I don't think there's anything better than that. Making a full figure out of green stuff, good luck. A point of advice, if that's the easier path, and if you have extra green stuff you want to use, don't make the whole figure at once. Make a leg. Make another leg, make a torso, go piece by piece, because you're not going to have enough time to sculpt every single detail of the model before it starts to become harder to work with. That said, if you have an existing model and it needs a pauldron, yeah, green stuff is your best friend.
Even then, what I would recommend before sculpting the full model out of clay or out of green stuff is if you have spare bits from, like, say 40k minis or something, you can actually just file those down thinner and, like, remove detail and then green stuff detail back on.
Yeah. Also thin your paints.
Yes.
Just, I don't care who you are, your paints are too thick, you should thin them more.
Now,
What's one kind of setting? Abe has a good question here for all of us, I think. Can I ask, what is one kind of setting all of you would love to try to run a campaign in, like Star Wars or Mad Max or a modern day meets fantasy kind of deal?
now,
So I have an idea in mind for this already, if you don't mind me going first.
go for it.
So, I have been drawing a lot of inspiration from Mountain Blade recently. I actually started playing the game originally to get ideas for and draw inspiration and research. And then I got hooked on the game, and that did not help me with making progress. But I would love to run a Iron Age level fantasy of like heroic myth kind of story, like very legendary high fantasy. And I am very excited to play a session, like run a campaign in a world that does not have advanced technology, because I feel like my Brinavast campaign I have played a little too fast and loose with technology, and like science is getting a little bit further ahead than I would have liked, and it's like we have a lot of stuff that I thought was cool in the world building stage that is more of a hindrance for me in my planning now. So being able to run this kind of legendary high fantasy gives me the ability to write a lot of legends, a lot of folklore, a lot of story into the world itself. Which allows me to make way more dynamic and like diverse kind of combat encounters if, for example, I'm not running a session where the party fights an owlbear, but the owlbear.
Just it is the Tarrasque of owlbears, if you would.
Yeah, there's no other owlbears, it's just this one.
Okay.
And then I can go wild with its design and make it do more different things than just be an owl that is also a bear.
Yeah. All right. I dig that. I can dig that. Jade, do you have a setting?
Yes. It's a setting that I want to run a game in. You mean?
Yeah.
That's the gist of it.
Mhm.
Honestly, the new world campaign that I'm running now is the setting as a GM, the setting that I want to run is the setting that I chose to run. Right. I like this. Other than that, though, I would like to play Monster Care Squad. I think Monster Care Squad with an explicitly non-combat party, I think would be phenomenal. I really like the system. I really like the design philosophy behind it. And I thoroughly enjoy the mentality of it. So, that's my answer, is... Yeah, both what I'm doing now, because I'm doing what I'm doing now because that's what I want to be doing, and, yeah, and Monster Care Squad because it looks rad as heck.
Now, I'm going to be a bit bland here, right? But I've never seen, and on YouTube, on Twitch, or even attempts from my friends, but I would like to have a pure tabletop experience of just a modern day zombie apocalypse and run a setting like that. Now, that's very bland, right? And I'm not talking like walking. I'm not talking. It could be whatever flavor of zombie that you want, whether you want like Resident Evil or Last of Us. I think Last of Us would be a pretty good choice if you wanted something like that, or Walking Dead, right? But just a workable whatnot, because a lot of DMs, they have trouble with cool. Like, let's run Dungeons and Dragons. Dungeons and Dragons does not make a great zombie. You can make a great undead campaign and whatnot, but that's also dictating to the high fantasy and whatnot, liches and stuff like that. But just the lethality of you get scratched or get bit one time by a zombie and you're just done. Your character is done. And I've just not seen a good system or rule set that implements that well, because, oh, cool, you can get scuffed and beat by a bat and, be fine the next day, but your most common enemy and what is going to be, at least at the start of the game, is going to be your average zombie.
Well, you know why you don't see that often?
Because it doesn't work.
Because it's not fun. You would have to do a lot of extra legwork to make that an enjoyable experience. Not saying it can't be done, but it's an uphill battle.
That's fine. I
did actually play one at one point. It didn't have like a hard rule set though. But what we did was we just used Google Maps.
So,
I'm mostly referring to the aspect of player lethality determined by one attack. That's what I mean is by that.
It's definitely acquired taste, and you have to have a certain rank of people. But I guess the closest I've ever seen to do that, it's not modern day, but if people know Undeadwood, which was actually done by Critical Role, I believe it was using the Savage World system or something like that. But that's been the closest that I've been able to find.
Someone in my chat recommends We Deal in Lead as a zombie system with a couple of tweaks to the system.
We deal in lead. I don't write that down.
And another thing you can do for the zombie system too, to avoid the one-hit lethality, is play by the way of hit point abstraction. So an example that I believe my chat has brought up a few times is like the Uncharted games. It only takes one bullet to kill the main character. It's just that when you're not getting killed, when people shoot at you, is his luck of the bullets zipping by and just barely missing. It's just his good fortune of not being in the place the bullet is at the same time until the one eventually gets past his good luck and puts him down.
Yeah, makes sense. Oh,
So
another system I want to try.
One zombie scratch kills you, but you just don't get scratched.
You just get good.
It's just good fortune that zombies' nails like drag across your t-shirt and doesn't quite tear through the skin.
Actually, can I take my answer back? Because I just got reminded of one movie that I think would be very cheesy, but could be fun.
Mm-hmm.
Do you get Rain of Fire? Has everyone seen that movie?
Nope.
No.
Okay, it is dragons are hibernating. A construction site awakens the dragon, and okay, cool. You lose modern society because dragons awaken, and they're actually real. But it is literally just base healing. I don't know. I'm very bland when it comes to like those type of stuff. That's why I try to keep away from running those type of games.
Also, I forgot to say Thirsty Sword Lesbians. That should have been my first pick. I want to play a game of Thirsty Sword Lesbians.
So I've heard about that. What's that system about?
Your description has sold me, and I'm up for it.
Can I ask what the system is about? I mean, the name says it all. Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, what's to describe? No, seriously. Basically, it's a system where emotional bonds and and connections are integrated into the core of the game. Like, how many times in D&D is your emotional bond with somebody actually a game mechanic as opposed to just a character thing, right? Almost never. And I think that is a part of why D&D has that sort of toxic mentality behind interpersonal relations, because there's no reason to foster one inherently. Thirsty Sword Lesbians is about, having... it's about having a system that reinforces flirting, sword fighting, and emotional connections and romance. I like to describe it as a game system that encourages the situation where a player lifts up another character's head by putting their sword at their neck and raising it so that they can confess their love. Like, it's a system that is sort of designed to create that scenario, and that's awesome.
Okay.
But it's a game where where emotions and emotional support and flirting and, we're actually patching up somebody's wounds but blushing because you secretly like them and they're taking their shirt off so that you can help them is actually an important part of the world and of the encounter. And it's cool. It's nice. You don't have to be, witty or good at flirting IRL, but yeah.
It kind of forces you to try and get a little bit better.
It creates a situation that will encourage and entice you to do that.
Okay.
That's how I would phrase it. It's not that, you have to, but it's a system that encourages that as the best way, in the same way that D&D encourages murder hobos. It does, and we should talk about it, because the core mechanics of D&D encourage you, the player, to go out and kill things. The core rules of D&D say, if you're not killing things, you're not getting better at whatever it is you're doing, right? You have to implement milestone systems. You have to implement XP rewards for roleplay. You have to implement a whole bunch of workarounds. Otherwise, at its core level, D&D doesn't encourage you to do anything other than dungeon dive.
They actually do. It's kind of in the world of, like, where we were talking earlier about the Pathfinder versus D&D, about Pathfinder just having all the rules for things.
Mm-hmm.
In the rules about gaining XP for 5th edition, they do actually say that you should give XP for role-playing, or they propose the milestone alternative as well.
Milestones are good. People should use
And
them.
all of their modules are also built with milestone in mind.
Mm-hmm.
So they have milestone and they have XP, and they give you should be leveling up around the same point, whichever one you use.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense.
Yeah. It's about incentivization.
I-
Everything is always.
Yeah.
Okay. So you want?
I am hard milestone person over XP.
Big is true. Actually, I do want to talk. I don't know when it's best to bring it up, but I do want to talk at length about obsidian encounters.
Well, I have no idea what that term means. What do you mean by that?
We should finish up any other thoughts we have because I want to dwell on this because it's important. But I
Well,
just wanted to plant the seed for later.
So you want to talk about murder hobos very quick, and how is that lead into obsidian moments or stuff?
Kind of.
Kind of. Okay, so we'll save the murder hobo for that topic. I don't think I have anything to add to what we were just talking about. Do you, Sprig?
I forgot what we were talking about already.
Jade, segue. What do you mean by obsidian? Because I've never heard that term before.
So.
Oh, you're talking about milestone, right? Milestone.
Right. Yeah. We're talking about incentivization, which is where what I wanted to segue into Obsidian with. Obsidian skill challenge system was made back in the 3.5 and 4th edition era of D&D for creating a mechanical path for making non-combat encounters more interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And the general idea of it is you go into a type of initiative order, and the players have to think about what they want to do and describe their actions for a certain situation. And the players need to accumulate a certain number of successes before they accumulate a certain number of failures. It's a skill challenge system. The general the idea is, okay, you have, let's say, you must have 5 successes before you have 4 failures. Okay? Cool. What does that mean? It means that the situation I used fairly recently was a ship that's at sea and a freak storm comes up. The ship is not prepared for the storm. And then you just go down the initiative order for players, like, what do you do to help prepare the ship for this storm? And what would normally be just a regular skill check with a success or a failure becomes a part of this entire encounter. And everyone must participate in it to some effect. And it also encourages the players to describe what they're doing, right? One person might be lashing down a board, someone else might be helping to bring in the sails, and people will be working together, so that okay, we're both going to bring the stuff below deck, whatever it happens to be. It encourages the team to work towards a common goal in a way that's more interesting than just a series of skill checks. It turns a series of skill checks into something a bit more dynamic. Another example is I want to build a bridge across a river. Okay, cool. How do you go about this? Well, everybody has to have something to bring to the table. The wizard might say, "Oh, I know about construction. I have taken some classes in construction and engineering." The rogue might be like, "I can get us some nails. Hold on. I'll be back in an hour. Let me get some what we need." The paladin might just say, "Okay, I'm going to grab the lumber and move it to the other side of the river so we can start building on that side." That's going to be a very difficult swimming check. And how well they do can determine either how many successes they have, or what I usually do is what the difficulty modifier is. That the more the player describes on it, the better likelihood it'll succeed. Just give invisible modifiers to the success. Last time I ran, the target number was 19, but I made the target number as low as 16 for some checks because the players were going all in on making a really phenomenal description, and I actually raised it to 20 and 21 when a player was like, "I do a thing." And yeah, that's the gist of it. You can look up the Obsidian Skill Challenge system and download it and play around with it and figure it out. I make a couple modifications to mine. I also put out a block of gems and a block of coins, and the gems represent failures, and when the last failure is gone, then things, then they failed it. When the last gem is gone, then they succeeded it. And everything else at that point falls into place. Once they succeed the challenge, everything else just sort of works. It just sort of means that, okay, you've succeeded the challenge, even if you didn't do every single detail, you got there. You got through the grueling part, and now you can do the rest narratively if you want. How do you feel about it, Sprig? Because you've experienced this firsthand with me running it.
I have actually very much enjoyed it. I think it's a very interesting way to run encounters other than combat ones. I'm not sure that I would use it for every single non-combat encounter, but it's a really good set-piece encounter style setup.
Set-piece encounter is a good way of describing it, yeah. And also, I just want to remind okay, you know what, Kashak.
Hey, I'm Kashak. I'm here. Yes. Hello.
Pop quiz, hotshot GM.
What do you mean, hotshot GM?
Pop quiz, hotshot. So, the rogue is trying to unlock a door, and they rolled a 4. They failed. What happens?
Do you want me to give you a serious answer or a funny answer?
I want you to tell me how you would rule that.
Alright. So here's the thing. I grew up learning DMing by following my uncle, right? And he grew up playing 2nd edition Advanced and 3.5. So I'm all about taking the 20 route, if people know what that is.
I know what you mean.
So
yeah.
I go about it taking 20. You're going to get through that door eventually. Time passes, but there will be consequences due to that time passing, and that won't be apparent. Well, mostly won't be apparent until later on that people realize. So, I'm also one who doesn't try to stop. I don't run a lot of dungeons, and right, you'll run into that type of that problem in a lot of dungeons. I try to keep my encounters more in natural environments or man-made structures, but not necessarily dungeon diving, because, well, Dungeons and Dragons, you can, if you want a dungeon, you can go find any other fucking DM. Excuse my French. Excuse my French. I don't... Funny enough, actually, going on that, I don't run a lot of dungeons, I don't throw a lot of dragons at my players. Why am I playing Dungeons and Dragons? Let me just call it something else.
Skill issue.
I don't throw many dragons at my players either, but I've made changes so that I can run dragons so that they are extra memorable if they ever decide to fight them. I
tend to make... I don't like to use like young or anything like that, and most of the draconic beasts people will find are like drakes and wyverns. If my players come across an actual dragon, well, I'm probably more likely to make it more chromatic compared to metallic, so that like, yes, you will deal with this problem. Politically, bribery, or actually combating. This is an issue that you have to go through. But that was me getting off track. I go about a modified version of taking 20. So they can avoid the skill check, passing time, and there wouldn't be and consequences or whatnot, or I will force them to take the 20, because if there's a door right there, and you need to get inside that door, well, there's also a couple different ways around it, and that's why people have parties to problem solve. But if the rogue is by himself, needs to get through that door, and does not, cool. You'll eventually get through there, but whether or not your lockpick breaks and you have to use a dagger and whatnot, fantasy, and you cut yourself with your dagger trying to get it open, you'll get pat through that door eventually. I'm not going to roadblock people, because that's not fun.
Right.
It's not fun for me to watch. Not fun for you to act out.
Right. And that's something that... It's fail forward, is really what I'm getting at. And I think that you all knew this was coming. And fail forward is exactly what you're saying. It's a failed check doesn't mean it doesn't happen. It means it doesn't happen according to plan. A rogue trying to unlock a door, if you fail and you just say, okay, you don't unlock the door, what happens? The player just tries again. And you just wasted everyone's time. The player just says, "Oh, okay, I'm just going to, sit here with and keep on rolling until I get it," and no one cares about that. Let the door open. Let the door open and have the mayor inside. let the door open, and a guard is turning the corner and spots you, or maybe the guard turns the corner and doesn't spot you, but they're starting to come this way, or maybe the door opens with a loud creak, or maybe the door opens and you see the mayor in there with a mistress who you don't recognize because that's not the mayor's wife. You make it more interesting. You don't fail the players and say, "Oh, you messed up. Keep up." No one cares. No, that's not interesting. That's not fun. That's not dynamic. That's not engaging. Push the game. Fail forward. Fail in a way that keeps the story moving forward, preferably in a way that's even more interesting than before.
Yeah. I personally, I like to have a little more context, like have context play more of a role. But like another example of the same thing, you could have like, maybe there's monsters at your back and you need to get through that door right this second. It's not just oh, you'll get it in 20 minutes. It's, I need to get through this door right now. What are the consequences to that? Well, picking this lock, you know, you get the first tumbler and you just can't quite find the second one, but there's a window on this door. So you smash it open with your elbow and force the lock open from the other side instead.
Take some damage because of glass and whatnot, but
Yeah,
you still get the door open.
Yeah, you take a little bit of damage from the glass and, like, you make a loud noise that attracts more of the monsters, and that's an opening in the door now that the monsters can see you through.
I wouldn't necessarily make up another, play another character's actions, but I definitely understand what you're saying with that. Yeah, I understand what you mean.
Yeah, it's just an example of, like...
Yeah.
A different way to get to the same place.
Yeah. You fail to lockpick the chest, and the chest rolls its eyes at you.
It's a mimic! Have fun! Oh. Actually, that's something I want to bring up once we're done this topic, actually, is... But we'll get into that. You just remind me of a talking point I wanted, Jade, right there.
Welcome in, all Raiders. Thank you all for coming.
Gaming.
But, is there anything you wanted to keep going on the whole Obsidian skill challenge, Jade?
I covered most of what I wanted to, and that's to encourage people to think about it and to give a little bit of an example of it. I mean,
how about that murder hobo a little bit?
How
about the murder hobo a little bit? You're saying that D&D breeds murder hobo. Did you want to touch upon that at all?
Every game system incentivizes you to do something based on what the rules are and what the focus of the mechanics are. And
D&D is a lot about combat for experience.
It is. At a base level, how much of you... Okay, you know what? Hold on. One sec. Let me pull up a Dungeons and or Dragons character sheet. Cool.
Oh, are we looking at Masana?
No, I pulled up Abaddon. So, how many things on the character sheet are related to combat? We're just glancing at the first page. Movement only matters in combat. Defenses only matter in combat. Action points realistically only matter in combat. You have basic attacks, HP, your bloodied value, your healing surge value. I mean, I'm looking at anyways, and everything outside of skills is and base stats are combat focused. Everything that's staring at you, everything that you made, everything that's important when you built your character is all combat. And let's compare this with a White Wolf character sheet. Cool. Same thing, just looking at the first page. You have talents, alertness, athletics, brawl. You have your talents and skills and knowledges. Your attributes include physical, social, and mental. Your advantages is as close as you get to something that's directly combat related. You have your health pool here, but at the same time, you also have a blood pool, and which is used
Your
as
hunger.
much out of combat, and your willpower and hunger is used outside of combat as much as it's used inside of it. There's very little that's actually combat forward on a Vampire Masquerade character sheet. Now, let's go into another character sheet here. Monster Care Squad. I mean, you can already envision where this is going to go, and you'll be exactly correct. Where's my sheet? Where's my character sheet here? Heck.
Lancer is similarly like a lot of combat stuff on your sheet.
Mm-hmm.
And these type of systems are for those type of players who want to actually play combat, and there's other systems for more role playing and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
There's a system for people for every cup of tea under the sun.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with playing a combat focused system. I'm not saying there's any issue with that. It's just being conscious of what is incentivizing you. It's being conscious of what the world is making the primary focus. That's really what it boils down to. And it's easy not to think about it. It's easy not to think about it, and frankly, that's a mistake. Yeah. I can't find the Monster Care Squad character sheet for some reason. But...
Oh no.
Tragic. Truly a tragedy. But, in... Thirsty Sword Lesbians, which I do bring up because it's so interesting because it is a break from what you'd expect. It is a very different mindset, you know? Relationships are a core part of that character sheet. It's who do you like, who do you feel emotionally connected to, who do you feel distant or animosity to. Like, there is, you know, that is a very important part of the character sheet in that game. It's like you have your daring, your grace, your heart, your will, your spirit as your core stats, but, you know, you also have aesthetics, and you also have, you know, your combat archetype, sure, but you also have, like, your demeanor and how you're dressing as a core part of what the game asks you to think about. And when you're looking at your character sheet, it says, what is your character? How feral are you? You have a stat between 0 and 4. If you hit 4, you can't control yourself anymore. Like, that's just a core stat that's just a core function of the game. If you hit a certain threshold, you lose your ability to emotionally control yourself, and you might end up confessing, you might end up kissing someone, you might end up running away and crying, whatever is appropriate for the situation. But the fact of the matter is that there is a very important component that, you know, that is core to the game, which in D&D, again, everything is combat focused, and that's not inherently a bad thing if you're playing a combat focused game. But if you are not playing a combat focused game, it becomes a bad thing very quickly, as you subconsciously are realizing every time you look at your character sheet that represents you, that everything on the Pathfinder character sheet is armor class, saving throws, hit points, melee strikes, ranged strikes, and that's literally the front page outside of skills. Everything aside from your skills on the Pathfinder character sheet is all combat focused. You have a tiny little line for background, and it's supposed to be one word because the background is just a thing that you picked from a list. It's not a character description. And before anyone says, though, there's a place for a character description in Sketch, yeah, it's on the 3rd page. Your personality stats are on the 3rd page. That is not what's staring at you in your face when you're playing the game, because you are going to have it turned towards the 1st page. And I'll be honest, none of my characters filled out that part of the wait, hold on, let me check yours, Brig, before I'll be honest, none of my characters filled that part of the character sheet out. They're all blank.
Yeah, I believe because I turned over to you the PDF, which was like, I just had to get the parts that were mechanical out. They have filled it out on my own version.
I believe it, but I'm just saying, you know, it's a question of what the game system at a base level
Oh, that's right, no.
is putting forward to
fill it out
you.
on my sheet, and then because I made another character sheet for Liv's game, it broke Path Builder and deleted my original sheet, so I don't have it anymore.
Oh no.
Yeah, that tracks. Yeah, okay. I believe that.
I had to rebuild my character sheet entirely.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to get about incentivization. And the murder hobo thing is baked into D&D, whether you like it or not. You have to acknowledge it. You have to at least look at the system and say, yes, 90% of what I'm building when I'm writing out my character stuff is about how hard I can punch, how I punch. Do I punch with spells or do I punch with a sword? What does punching mean for this character is 90% of what your character is. And Mouse Guard, it ain't. Like in Dungeon World, like, yeah, you have some combat, sure, absolutely, but that's, you have more than that. The way I've heard Mouse Guard described is the reason that you are fighting is more important than the fact that you are. Like, that's just a different mentality, and it's a different mentality that I think not enough people realize. And a lot of people don't want to realize. A big part of the murder hobo things, and I'm sure that many people have had this in their games, and I have unironically had it, of where someone attacks a merchant because there hasn't been a combat encounter in 45 minutes. The player just wants to fight something because that's what playing the game means to them. Playing the game doesn't mean, following the plot line. They want in a combat encounter because that's what's most fun, and that's all they've built their character to do. Right. In many cases.
I had an example of that. It wasn't necessarily the player being a murder hobo as much as just not being invested in the game and not paying much attention in sessions. But there were a couple of times that I had a player in my Tuesday campaign who just attacked something. Just out of nowhere would attack. One time I remember was we did the initiative, initiative was rolled, and what the druid did immediately, because they were dealing with a giant crocodile, was she force-fed an animal friendship potion they had bought earlier. So they charmed this crocodile, and it's like, oh cool, now we've got a friend who is local to the swamps and can help us get through this foggy swamp where the frog things have been shooting poison darts at us.
Are you sure about that?
And then the rogue just went stab and stabbed it in the head immediately after it was charmed, breaking the charm and wasting the potion.
But they had a lot of modifiers because it was a helpless enemy. That's a coup de grace. Obviously they should stab it.
That must have been so infuriating for the druid.
Yeah, so at that time I didn't have to do anything to deal with the murder hobo in my party because my party dealt with the murder hobo for me. And then it happened again a few months later in a separate thing in the campaign where they were stopped by a border patrol. And they weren't sure if they were official or not, and a couple of them were fairly convinced they were bandits, not actually a border patrol. One of the NPCs in the group with them was saying it's okay, we'll just pay them and we'll be on our way, and it's not a big deal, they're not asking for that much money anyway. The border patrol specifically was just making sure the people brought money to go to this big festival, because they didn't want people bringing goods, selling stuff, and taking all the money out of the city. They weren't even gonna keep the money, they just wanted to check that people had money. By pretending to, demand a charge to get into the city. So the rogue stabbed one. Turned it into a combat, they killed everybody. And to make sure that they didn't get caught about it, they had to leave behind a couple of their... Well, they did this whole thing, and two of the NPCs that were with the party from the beginning left the party immediately. They couldn't bear to be with people who would attack innocent guards just doing their job. One of the NPCs, it did the I'm not mad at you, I'm just disappointed thing.
Yep.
They've since gotten him to, they've since rebuilt the rapport that they had with that character, but the other two they've just not heard from in ages. Um, and when they went into the city, they also met the two leaders of that patrol, were the daughters of the... Essentially, he's like the governor of the city, functionally.
Mm-hmm.
And they had to deal with, like, their own internal guilt of seeing, like, oh yeah, we just killed two really important people who were just doing their jobs, and this is their dad who is now confused and mourning over the loss of his daughters.
Yeah.
My party is at this point, I'm very glad, seriously considering consequences of their actions at this point. Because I've made sure that there were consequences to everything they choose to do. And I've also helped, a lot in... one thing that's helped them a lot in that is I've made sure that a lot of their most powerful allies are not who you would expect to be their allies, and their enemies are not who you would expect to be their enemies.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give like an example?
So, a couple of examples is one of their longest standing, most powerful allies is a Lich King.
Alright.
Another is an Archdemon.
Nice.
A couple of their worst enemies are the Pope of the home church of the home country that most of the party is from.
Well, I think that hits a lot. I think that's actually pretty more common than not, I feel.
I've played a Final Fantasy game.
Another one of their strongest, greater allies is the kingpin of basically the organized mob that operates in the underground of, or the underbelly of a very major trade city. But also they're wonderful friends with the lord of that city.
You gotta love the
And
unexpected
it's,
people.
that kingpin is really interesting because he's been like a frenemy. He's been an ally and an enemy of theirs.
And actually, on that note, I want to talk about characters not having static motivations. You know, you don't. No one. You don't have to have people who are good and evil. You know, that's people. In real life, nobody thinks that they're the villain. Some of the worst people in history genuinely thought that what they were doing was going to protect their people, or was going to stop what they considered to be a greater evil than what they were doing. Nobody thinks that they are the bad guy, unless they're 12 and think that they're being edgy. But realistically,
Calling out a lot of people.
No one thinks that they're the bad guy, and realistically, no one's that altruistic. I mean, yeah, sure, we're dealing with late-stage capitalism, but even in a medieval period, there was a lot of, the majority of people would not, go on a 3-day quest to help somebody because on goodwill alone, right? Like, make characters that have their own motivations and let them conflict. Let them conflict. I mean, yeah.
Said mob boss that I was just talking about earlier, there was one point he warned the party about an attempt on a noblewoman's life when she was leaving the city. So they went and they stopped the attempt on her life. Oh, well, coincidentally, all the people that they killed were people that worked for him that he didn't like. So he sent his own people he didn't want to deal with anymore to attack the noblewoman, then sent a group of adventurers to kill them to ingratiate himself to that noblewoman.
Getting played. See, the party was playing checkers. The kingpin was playing chess right there, truly.
Yeah.
Hmm.
That's something similar. I can't talk about that actually. That would be spoilers for people. Oh, I really want to talk about that now. All right, never mind.
Um, the Pope has another example of character who doesn't think he's the bad guy even though he's the villain. Or the Lich King, who, like, is one of their greatest allies, but also maybe isn't necessarily the nicest guy either. The Lich King is assembling an army of undead under all the major cities across the former empire in preparation for this huge war that's going to consume the world. He's doing it to save the world, but only because that's where his stuff is.
I'm going to blow up the earth! Egads, not the earth! That's where I keep all my stuff!
Yep.
Ah.
So, like, he hasn't told the party what he's gonna do after that war. They have no idea, but they assume it's probably not good.
Someone's going to get that reference. I'm just watching chats right now. Someone's going to get that reference, and I think it's going to be Buck. Sorry.
You're fine.
Or the Pope of that church, for example, is like... from his perspective, the party just showed up one day, broke into the reliquary of the church, stole everything that wasn't nailed down, and left. And then he caught a member of the party, the paladin, carrying a sword that they know, the church knows, comes from this, essentially a deity.
Mm-hmm.
And that the only way to attune to it is if the former wielder is dead. So they had the person from the church that they approved of was attuned to the sword at the time, and then he turned up with the sword.
Mm-hmm.
So they 100%, they got confirmation that he at least led to the death of one of the people that they are involved with. And he's somehow connected to these people who stole everything in the reliquary, except for one item. So, like, from their perspective, these are just criminals. These are murderers and criminals who came into the city and then ran off with everything that they could get their hands on.
Mm-hmm.
And even then, they also, when they broke in and stole all those relics, they also broke out a prisoner. The party, when they broke in to, like, break out that prisoner and stuff, they broke in because they were trying to steal a relic that was stolen from, a nature spirit, to keep the lore simple.
Mm-hmm.
There was a relic that was stolen from a nature spirit. It was a petrified acorn that was stolen because it was connected with one of the gods of that religion as well. So that nature spirit was angry that it was stolen and was attacking the town where the preacher who took it lived. So to make it stop attacking the town rather than killing the nature spirit, they agreed to go and steal back the petrified acorn.
Nice.
And then it's just the altruistic party members who wanted to save the village because, like, it was the druid's hometown, the paladin is dating the druid. Those characters were making the distraction, while the wizard and the rogue, who are just super sneaky and a little bit more selfish, were in a reliquary stealing something anyways. They just figured they might as well grab everything that they could.
That it kind of plays into has people seen the new Dungeons and Dragons movie, Honor Among Thieves?
Not
Yes.
yet.
It's kind of similar to that movie now that describing that. Would you say, Sprig?
There are some similarities.
Yeah.
Just not going to spoilers.
Yeah.
But also, to threaten a spoiler but not quite get there, the absolute lad in that movie. Best part of the movie, by far. I will say nothing more. If you've seen it, you know exactly what I mean. If you don't, you don't. But when you watch it, you will. Does Jeremy Irons reprise his character? I have no idea.
So I wanted to touch upon topic and whatnot. Now, Jade, you made the offhand comment about, I picked the lock. It rolled its eyes at you, right? And then we made the mimic joke. Now, this is definitely going into homebrew, and we're gonna kind of segue into your speciality, Sprig. How do you guys, eventually, if after a couple of years you've played Dungeons and Dragons with the same group, right?
Mhm.
They're going to get used to fighting the base monsters of any system, right?
Mhm.
What are some of the tips, tricks that you could give to people listening right now, other fellow DMs, to make those monsters, even though if you don't change their stat block, change them so that way the players aren't expecting it?
I just never use monsters that are already written.
So,
I just write my own monsters from scratch every single time.
Now, when you write your own monsters, do you take, like, let's say you actually want to use a mimic, do you how would you use something?
Sometimes I'll grab like the original stat block for inspiration, but I'll almost never use the original stat block.
Okay.
I will use an original stat block basically all the time. I will never use it for its original purpose. My last encounter, if I can... Actually, I'm just going to pull it up here.
Are we getting a recap from Jade's Pathfinder function?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
Let me just pull it up here because it is worth pulling up. I have no idea what it was. Oh well, I'm sure it was pretty cool. I had an encounter, and the encounter was a goblin raid. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So there was an encounter raid, and with goblins, and all the players had to fight goblins. There were two goblins types in the encounter. One was a sorry, I'm also looking it up, trying to find it while I'm talking and saying words. One was actually just a an ant. One of the goblins was a giant ant, straight copy pasted from the rulebook, and yeah, they when they on hit, they deal 1d8 plus 4 damage, and they grab you. And the original one, they grab you because it's attack with mandibles. I just had them grab as a free action in addition to the attack, because I wanted to use the stat block. And they have a stinger. It does d6 plus 4 plus ant venom. Cool. I had the goblin just drop their weapon, pull out a small dagger that looked like it was coated with a wet substance, and try to shiv a player. I used the stat block. I kept the encounter balanced to the system. Now I still need to learn how to balance the encounters better, but that's neither here nor there. I kept the encounter characters exactly with what the encounter was made for, exactly with what the encounter is supposed to quote-unquote have. And I just didn't use it as what it was supposed to look like. I just reskinned it. But this way, the players are always on their feet. You know, if you have, like, look at a unicorn, okay? Let's just take a look at a unicorn. What is a unicorn? It's a large fey beast. Yeah. I mean, I would start with give me an enemy type. Give me a type of enemy, and I'll go from there.
Okay.
Aberration.
That's actually what I was going to go with, because I actually, like, to give a little spoiler for you two, if you play Grimhall with me, I use aberrations a lot. And well, for eldritch beings and whatnot. But yes, aberrations. Beholder. To be specific.
Okay. Alright, well, let's make an beholder for a level 3 party. I'm just going to use the unicorn. Why not? I just already pulled it up. Screw it. You know what? No, actually, it doesn't work terribly well. So let's see what else works. There's a vampiric mist at level 3. Let's check that thing out. We're trying to emulate a low-level beholder. Well, this thing has a Misty Tendril on a melee attack with a Blood Siphon. We can handle the Blood Siphon as, siphoning magic energy that functions the same as this. Forces a Fortitude save, and... Okay, cool. Okay, well, Beholder kind of wants more ranged attacks. What's a good something that has some ranged attack stuff? What is this?
Generic guard has a crossbow, probably.
Yeah, that would work fine. I pulled up a Naughty Sage. Cool. They have a melee fang attack that can pierce plus venom. I can turn that into a deadly, a touch range spell easily enough. It's a touch range poison spell. Why not? They have an innate blur. Cool. And they also have color spray. Awesome. I can just use this a Naughty Sage and turn it into a beholder. It even has that venom that I talked about, which is because I think it's like some sort of insectoid creature. I don't know. I think so. Whatever. Hey, look! It can do a silk web. Awesome. That's just a beholder casting a binding spell. Like, the rules are valuable. I don't go full sprig and make my own everything. I'll use the things that are already in the system, but I won't let the players know what it actually is. I won't let the players know that, hey, the things that are, nothing even remotely like what they say they are, Because why bother? Because it makes it more interesting, I'm keeping a balanced system, but this lets me devise an encounter across whatever I want. If I want a 3rd level beholder, and I want to use a beholder, I could try to take a beholder and scale it down to 3rd level, but that's an exercise in tragedy. That's going to be incredibly boring. It's gonna, if you try to scale a beholder down to level 3, you don't have a beholder anymore. Whereas if I take this, already existing level 4 creature, reskin it as a beholder, I have something interesting. I have a character that can create an encounter that will suit the combat that is intended by the encounter.
Compared to that, I can walk you through my general method.
Oh, please, I would love to.
So, I'll use undead because that's an easy example that, I've done already a fair amount.
Mm-hmm.
So, the first time my players run into undead monsters, I'll just give them, standard zombie skeleton kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a basic undead mob that you can fight as your, low-level encounter. It's nothing too unfamiliar. Maybe, I'll have the skeletons be a little bit more tactical because they are said to be more intelligent than the zombies. So I'll just have the zombies, march forward slowly and the skeletons are moving around taking shots with their arrows. And just kind of, sell the theme of the encounter in that first one. And then, your next time you run into the undead, you've gone a little bit deeper into the Lich's territory. Well, now you're running into, the lieutenants of the Lich's army. So you've got demi-liches, you've got creatures that are also undead, but they are spellcasters. They're capable of commanding the other undead under their command. And so they have spellcasting that can heal the undead and damage the players, and now the zombies are moving in simple unit tactics while the skeletons are firing in volleys together rather than individually from all over the place. And then you start running into skeletons that are up armored and better equipped, and you start facing off with greater abominations. There was a creature I used called the Flesh Heap, which is a giant amalgamation of zombies and skeletons formed into one large creature. And any time that it moved into a space that was occupied by an undead creature, it just absorbed that creature and regained hit points. And when you killed it, instead of it dying, it just spilled out a random die roll of zombies and skeletons.
Ah, okay.
Nice.
Oh, that.
So, I make mixed in. Actually, a big thing that I use for inspiration Jade, you are familiar at least, is War Machine Hordes.
Mhm.
I use mixed
Phenomenal
unit
game.
tactics where I make different types of units that fill different roles to make a more tactically engaging fight, where the players get to choose their targets and decide on which part of the fight is difficult to pick that part out first by focusing their fire.
Mm-hmm.
Alright, love to hear it.
Mm-hmm.
Flesh Heap, as an easy example, is like the thing you don't bother shooting at until all of its support is gone. Cause like, oh no, the Flesh Heap is approaching. Quick, kill the skeletons between us and it first. You kill all the skeletons and you open fire on the Flesh Heap. It moves on top of the skeletons and absorbs their dead bodies and regains hit points.
Oh, heck.
Instead, put something in front of the skeletons to slow them down, like a grease spell. The skeletons slip and fall and get stuck, and then the Flesh Heap steps into their space and absorbs them and gains hit points. But it's still full health, so it doesn't gain anything. It just removed the skeletons for you.
Yeah. On that note, reskin your abilities as a player.
Yes.
Make your abilities fit what your... If your description of your character starts with their class or race or, heaven help you, their level, you don't have an interesting character. If you're going to tell me about your character, open up with what makes them cool. What makes them cool, I'll tell you right now, is not their class. Right? And
Anyone can play that class. So.
yeah, it's like I have a fighter. They're a gnoll. Cool. Okay, what are you playing? I have a character that is a walking goddess who has lost all of her tribe and followers and is trying to regain a foothold upon both herself to understand the world that she's trapped in, as well as the world outside of the small area that she kept watch over for only a couple thousand years.
At the same time as I agree with you on that, I do feel like at the same time that's a little bit... I don't know if, like, overkill is the right word, or...
Oh, I'm extra. I don't deny that I'm extra.
You've said it many times.
I think that it's fine to begin your description by explaining, like, the basic mechanical choices you made. Because a lot of the time that people ask what your character is, that's specifically what they're asking for. Like,
really?
Even among role-playing circles, I find about 90-95% of players ask what you are mechanically first. So I explain what I am mechanically, and then I like to launch into my character.
That is the opposite of my experience.
That's actually my experience, because generally when in my cup of tea, because I'm usually DMing and whatnot, when people ask what of my players are playing, they're trying to figure out party dynamics and whatnot first before they go into actual character personality.
That is so strange to me.
Do you think that might be a generational difference?
Maybe. I mean, I think it might be not so much generational, so much as background. Again, I started playing in an acting college, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a background thing, probably.
I think it's a background thing, but for me, you know, what is your character is what makes your character interesting. And if I'm asking what somebody's character is, I'm asking what makes your character interesting. What makes them unique? What makes them worthy of being the main character in the story that they're in? One of the main characters, and what makes them a protagonist, you know? And mechanics don't answer that question. For me, at least.
Yeah, but for me, like, what I do is I like to get both things out, but it's most of the time when people ask, they're just asking what mechanically it is, and then you tell them what makes them interesting. So, like, I had a character I played a little while back as an example, who I will explain very quickly, as she was a human fighter, which is, I know, it's tantamount to suicide. It's terrible. It's the most uninteresting character mechanically. Interesting character part now was that she was a warrior priest of a, like, small religious sect from the dragonborn country of her world. In that world, this country is, like, very volcanic, and it's very difficult to support a large population anywhere, so there's no large formal militaries there. Because it's just not realistic to fight a war with hundreds of people on each side, because there's not enough food to support that kind of army. You can't afford to get involved in like salted earth tactics, because there's not enough earth that is habitable for them to do it.
Yeah.
So instead, this country has agreed, like this island, this continent agreed to settle all of their disputes through the use of a champion. So to make sure that these battles are entirely neutral, there is a faith where there are essentially battle referees who run this organization where these champions can battle, and they are there to guarantee that no one interferes. The way they guarantee no one interferes is by being the biggest, meanest warriors around with the best armor and equipment. And the only way to do that was to make the best armor and equipment themselves.
So everyone is a blacksmith and whatnot.
Yeah, but when you join this, you have to completely forgo your identity. You have to give up everything about who you were to become one of these warrior priests. Because if you don't, then you're no longer neutral. So,
Neat.
my character was one of these warrior priests. She was still in training, and she was traveling the world to learn the skills of an armorer so that she could return and take up her duty. So she was a character who gave up her name, gave up her face, everything about who she was, traveling the world to learn the craft of an armorer and a blacksmith. And to do that, she was traveling the world and doing good deeds and helping people and saving lives and stuff so that she could find someone who could train her. And so, like, mechanically at the start of the game, it was, why do you have such bad armor then as a level 1 fighter when you're already this championed warrior priest? Oh, it's fairly simple. I've taken an absolute battering on my way here because I never turned down a fight, because I have to be the strongest warrior and the greatest armorer. So I'm coming already injured. I'm showing up with like 3 cracked ribs and 4 broken toes. My armor is beaten to dented plates. My plate armor is no good anymore. I have to fix it.
So then, do you think, as the character goes up, leveling up, do you think that's just them healing their old wounds?
Yeah, that was her recovering from her injuries and getting back to who she was originally, and her armor upgrades, rather than equipping like magic armor and stuff, she had to figure out how to forge those enchantments into her own armor instead.
Okay.
So like, that's just an example of, mechanically I told you I'm a human fighter, and then this is what makes my human fighter interesting. And to anyone who is asking about it, yes, absolutely, she was inspired heavily by The Mandalorian, because I watched the entire first season like a week before I made the character.
Taking inspiration from other media, folks.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, Kashak, on the note of reskinning, if I cast Grease, it's going to be me freezing the ground with ice.
Alright.
That's why I took Grease.
Flavor is free.
I also remembered another thing that was very funny for the characters that I wanted to bring up. In the campaign, everyone knew her as unimportant. That was her name. Unimportant. Because when the party was asking her what they should call her, she said her name is unimportant, it doesn't matter, don't just call me whatever you want.
Oh, that's nice.
And I'm like, okay, so we'll call you unimportant? And she just shrugged, and then they called her unimportant for the rest of the time I played that character.
One time I played a Seeker. One second. I'm actually going to pull up that character right now so I can actually speak from what I've actually done. But I played a Seeker, which is the equivalent of an Arcane Archer. And I didn't want to play an Arcane character. I didn't want anything about the character to be Arcane. Instead, I wanted the character to be an alchemist. So I took the character, all the abilities, all the powers, all of the skills, and reskinned all of them to be an alchemist who had a slingshot on his wrist. The elemental spirits that lets you choose cold, fire, lightning, or thunder when you use the power was sending out various Leiden jars or alchemical bottles to strike an enemy. The grappling spirits that causes enemies to erupt from the ground and grab at the legs of an opponent was a vial of glue that stuck an enemy to the ground to hinder their movement. Everything that I did was completely adjusted. And then I took things that would just fit the character, of course. Poison damages was something that just translates one-to-one. But I played the character I wanted to play. And I had more fun because of it. Even though all the mechanics were intact. I didn't ask the DM to homebrew something. I didn't say, hey, I'm a better game dev than the people who made this game. I didn't say, I want to do something that I haven't playtested for 6 weeks. I said, hey, I want to play this class that's in the game. I want to play this established class that already exists in the game and world, but I would want them to be something that fits what this character is, what I want to present as a character. And it was a lot of fun. That's the story. But yeah, it was an arcane archer.
That feels like a wonderful segue into homebrew to me.
It does. It does.
Do I have? Sprig, you're a homebrew character that you're playing in Luminon here.
Yeah. Would you like we can go through like the homebrew revised marshals?
So, I would love to focus on your fighter here because we want to talk about homebrew. And folks,
Yeah, sure.
I have notes, and I definitely want to give feedback. This is not the stream for me to give feedback from what I've been collecting for you, Sprig, and whatnot. But I would love.
You're welcome to give it too.
I just don't feel like this is the. I would love to give it to you, like maybe in a off-stream sort of setting and whatnot, because I feel like that would be more productive. However, I would like to show people, like, for people who have been watching the campaign from either Jade or Sprig's perspective, if I can just turn your attention to this PDF, because this is, Sprig is playing a fighter, but she has made something that doesn't feel stale.
I am not a fighter that goes bonk bonk done. Mechanically, I actually have options to take during combat. Things I can do. Which are similar-ish to spells.
Look at the 9 swords, let's go! Anyone?
I cast
Anyone?
punch.
No? Okay.
I didn't hear what you said.
Oh, I said Book of the 9 Swords, let's go.
Oh.
It was a controversial 3.5 book that gave fighters specifically, but melee martial classes, spell-like abilities that were more interesting and fun to play.
Why was it controversial?
Because people whined that why can I only do this once a day? because that's how it works, and it's interesting and it's balanced. It's
Mechanics!
Yeah, because it's fun. Because it's fun! Sometimes you can have fun!
So, on that note, what I did with this system, like with these revised martials, is I designed all of the features to be weaker individually than spellcasting.
Because the fighter shouldn't be a spellcaster.
So, like, your first level spell is still gonna outstrip anything that this fighter can do. But, the point is, the martial features that I designed are borderline infinite. You can just keep using them, but they do have a resource associated with them that you have to plan around during your turns. So in particular for this case, there's like the fighting styles I reworked to make them more dynamic rather than just you get +2 to damage.
Whereas like the archery lets you gives like the first little bit of sharpshooter.
Yeah, it gives +2 to attack and damage, and ignore 3/4 cover as long as you don't have disadvantage. So the sharpshooter still gets rid of that as long as you don't have disadvantage, so it's not a waste to take sharpshooter. But it gives you a little bit more dynamic to what you can choose to do during combat.
Now, just very quickly, are these fighting styles, like in their changes, unique to the fighter, or would the paladin and ranger have access to similar fighting styles?
The way that I've been working on the revised martials was that fighting styles were the same for everyone.
Okay.
So I was just writing my fighting styles so that anyone can take any fighting style, and they're the same for everyone.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
I will be right back, but please continue.
So, protection is the fighting style that I'm using for Ava, which is basically the same as the interception fighting style that they had in Unearthed Arcana. There was the interception fighting style, which you could roll a d10 plus proficiency bonus to reduce damage of an attack that hit against someone that was within 5 feet of you. I made it a little bit more robust by making it also block AoE for the, like, a line behind it, so you count as a wall that blocks the line of sight for it, similar to like Fireball. And I made it so you can also use it on yourself. Because it consumes a reaction to use anyway, and you only get 1 reaction per round, so using this to reduce damage means you remove your ability to be a threat to a creature that comes after you, like tries to run away from you. And then Determination was a new feature that I made, was just a new resource, which is what fuels your second wind and that kind of thing. So you can use your second wind and your Indomitable more frequently, but it still has a cost. And that cost can be replenished, but it's a resource that you can use for either feature instead of only getting each one once per day. I also adjusted second wind, so technically it's worse. Instead of just 1 free die per day, it's 1 hit die that you consume as a bonus action. So you're borrowing against your short rest healing. Not enough games really use short rests anyway, so it shouldn't really heavily impact your healing output. But it does, like, detract from something else to use it, because hit dice are not a resource that's used enough in D&D. Focus is the other one that's big that I feel like Kashak hasn't fully familiarized with yet in the campaign where I'm playing Ava. Focus is a resource that you just generate every round, and then it's consumed to use all your features. Ava, rather than going for the Nova round of action surging, has gone hard on using focus on all of her regular focused actions, which just give her more versatile use of her actions during regular action economy. Which lets her be an absolute grappling menace. Just total control menace. Damage, none, but total menace. Other than that, not a lot of change from other fighter features. Action Surge is like way higher costing. Instead of just like, oh, you get to do this once for free every short rest, it's you need to save up 6 focus to do it. Which is, starting at level 1, you can do it on your 3rd turn of combat. It gets a little bit earlier at later levels, but like, you have to not spend any of your focus points and just do, you know, whack past fighter to get to use that Nova now. And then each time you use it, it increases in cost. So it's when fights go on longer, the longer that a fight goes on, the more powerful that a martial character gets, with the way that I've designed the revised martials. Whereas a spellcaster wants a fight to end quickly so that they don't consume as many spell slots. But that's getting into the whole thing of like hit points are also a resource that like Pack Tactics has gone into way more detail about.
Oh yeah, hit points as a resource is a long and storied comment, right? That goes into any tabletop game or any game, honestly. If you need to win an encounter, if your HP is above 0, you can win the encounter, and there are systems out there that have thresholds. White Wolf is one of them. Ironclaw is another one that takes it a little bit more viciously, because it's a very lethal system. But yeah, HP as a resource is something a lot of people don't realize until they get better at gaming. You know, they think of like, oh, I want to avoid losing HP if I ever can. It's like, well, yeah, but.
I feel like that's a thing that you learn fast when you play, like, strength builds in Souls games, for example.
Or card games teach it very quickly.
Yeah.
But yeah, in Souls games as well. But like something like Hearthstone teaches the player very quickly that, okay, you can lose 2 HP now, or you can to give you an advantage for later, and that can shift the later part of the game in your favor. To a lesser extent in Magic, but a certain decks can make a lot of use out of that. That's more, conditional in that situation.
Yeah, so this is just kind of a general... I do a lot of homebrewing stuff. So for me, I know you were saying, like, ouch, I don't feel like I'm better than the designers who made the game or something like that. For me, I've always, to me, D&D has been a game that myself and the players and the DM, all involved in the game, control our play experience of D&D. For us, like for the tables that I've played at, it's always been, we make what we want to do in the game for ourselves. It's not just the rules that are presented to us. The rules that are presented to us are the stepping stone towards our own game. And to do that, we write things that we want to see as maybe magic, as spells, or items, or feats, or classes, or whatever. And for me, I have taken... The Revised Martials was a project I took on entirely because I felt challenged by something that... that, Pack Tactics had said to me in a conversation we had. We have not spoken since. I feel like Pack Tactics doesn't like me.
No, they just are very,
They're
reclusive.
very driven and very concentrated on their own, like, their own content.
Yeah. They're also a recluse.
I just jokingly say it. We had an interaction where I mentioned, like, I revised the ranger and made them a martial, like full martial, because I didn't like them spellcasting.
Yeah.
And they were like, "That's wrong and dumb, and you should feel bad." Not literal words, but like, they felt very strongly that spellcasting was the best part about the ranger, and mechanically, from a mathematical standpoint, they're correct.
Yeah, exactly. I was gonna say that. Yeah, it's like, I hate to say it, but they kind of. Yeah.
Thematically, to me, ranger as a spellcaster never made sense. Like, I'm a nature warden and a specialist at hunting and tracking and being in the woods. But also, I don't actually know how to track animals. I just use magic.
Just use magic.
Yeah, that to me that never made sense. It never felt like a ranger to me.
Mhm.
Which is
So-
why, once again, 4th edition is the best edition. Because 4th edition takes pure martial rangers and makes them completely mechanically distinct and different from any of the other martial classes, while removing the magic and, well, removing the majority of the magic, and keeping them powerful and dynamic despite it. Yeah, that's right. I went there again. Yeah, fight me.
All right, where are we fighting?
So that was just a decision that I made, and I never got around to fully refinishing the revised ranger that I did, because I revised the ranger a long time ago. And then my revised barbarian, actually, up here, was something that just came to me at one point while I was cooking. I was cooking my dinner one night, and I was thinking about how a barbarian in the campaign I played in on Sunday mornings, which was run by my friend Wolf, who joins me for Solasta on Saturdays and plays in my Tuesday and Wednesday campaigns. One of the players in that campaign played a barbarian, and his thing in every single combat was I rage, I move, I reckless attack, I'm done. And that was every single combat, all that he did. And it
Which-
felt awful as a player to see that being the only thing that he did.
And that goes back into what I said about descriptions, right? Like, I firmly believe that I could do that and make it engaging. You know, if I play a barbarian and I rage reckless attack, I believe that I could do the justice to that. I believe, like, okay, the first attack is going to, I think I could describe the attacks in an interesting enough manner to make that character interesting and dynamic for everybody at the table. But that's putting extra effort on me, because then I have to put the extra work into figuring out how to make that interesting every time I do it, which to me is fun. That's a fun avenue. But to a lot of people, that's a frustration, and yeah.
For me, what struck me was when I was cooking, I was thinking about barbarians really don't have much in the way of interesting decisions to make.
True.
Because
True.
they have, do I reckless attack and give everyone advantage against me, I take advantage for myself, or do I not reckless attack? That's kind of it.
Oh, that sounds like the healer's problem to me.
So, what I did was I went and redesigned Rage. And another problem the Barbarian had, which was part of this subject as well, is that they didn't have anything for not combat. They're angry dude with like a big list of features for combat things and nothing for non-combat things. So I changed that and I redesigned Rage so that I could use it as a thing for non-combat and a thing for combat, and so that it would be an interesting decision to make. Which is where this whole project started, and like this whole document started, all 31 pages of it. And since I've had a couple of times I've played around with this, and like this Path of the Elemental Nexus that's on my screen right now is a subclass that I made just off of a concept that a friend of mine proposed just for fun. They were like, what about a barbarian that does elemental things, like dragon things? And I went, oh, that's a cool idea, and then I wrote a whole subclass. And while updates on the project are not, like, ongoing anymore, I might occasionally jump back and, like, update something if I feel like it, but the project is frozen currently. If you are interested in rating these or using these for your 5th edition games, the Fighter, the Monkey, and the Barbarian are all playtested and... well, moderately playtested.
We're still playtesting your fighter right now.
Yeah, I'm still playtesting them a little bit, but... like, they're solid enough that I would say they are as balanced as Unearthed Arcana, at least. So if you're comfortable with running Unearthed Arcana or, like, slightly... so, like, relatively balanced homebrew,
Yeah.
all of my homebrew documents are available on my Discord channel, like my Discord server.
Mhm.
They're all pinned in my homebrewer channel, which is made just for like sharing homebrew with people. And they're just ultimately they are just a revision of the martial classes that give you the ability to make decisions more, to play the game, and have resources that aren't just HP and one-use abilities.
It makes them interesting and enjoyable. Imagine that.
Yeah. Ranger is also playable, but like is not as good as the Barbarian Fighter in Barbarian Fighter Monk.
No.
The rogue is here, but wasn't changed enough. There's some stuff that was started and that was interesting but isn't finished. And then there was the Slayer, which was a rewrite of the Blood Hunter, but still runs into the same problem of the Blood Hunter of basically just being combat features.
Yeah.
Mhm. Kashak, was there anything else that you wanted to? I was looking at the time. It's been 2 hours 40 minutes. I was going to start scooting off soon, but I did know that Kashak wanted to talk about how we have broken everything.
I think that could be a separate stream at this point.
Okay.
So we have been going for a while. I feel like that can be a separate stream where we can all talk about
Okay.
with chat about just different RPG stories that we've come through.
RPG stories. That'll be a good stream.
So
Yeah.
for next time when we have a session where multiple people can't come and whatnot, instead of just not doing anything, we can plan for that.
The only downside about playing online is that you can't see the DM ripping up their papers. You can hear it, but you can't actually visually see it. You know, like.
You think I have paper for this? No, we're playing online. We're playing online. I'm using the tools that I have at my disposal.
This is why I have hand tracking.
Well, hand tracking is going to be something for me down the road. I don't personally need it right now.
I was just joking about it.
I will say though, I do have a new addition to my model coming through. That's not hand tracking, but you know, it'll still add more expression.
Hype.
Can't wait for that. But yeah, no, don't really have anything else to add because I was mainly wanting to hear about your guys, well, the two of yours, and maybe some people in chat. Some people asked questions. I'm very thankful for people who did ask questions. But I kind of wanted to get other outside perspectives because I don't ask a lot of DM help for people. I kind of just do that myself. And,
Do cool stuff.
Yeah.
All right.
Whatever you're
All right,
doing, do something cooler to make it more fascinating. If it's too over the top, you're wrong. Go harder.
Okay.
But on the subject of like we've been going for a while, I still have about 2 hours if either of you would like to still hang out and go through more stuff.
My question.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, you finished.
I'm gonna spend about an hour going to the hot springs because I am still sore due to reasons that there's absolutely no way of knowing what happened.
Has nothing to do with the soup.
Nope, definitely.
I'm concerned about soup, but all right then.
You know, don't worry about it, Kashak. It's fine.
I will ask you in DM after.
But then I would be willing to return in about an hour, give or take, and play some Spirit Island.
Sure.
Yeah.
I would love to get your notes on my RPG sometime though too, Jade. If you ever have
I would
the
be delighted.
opportunity.
Yeah.
Jade.
What? What?
Nothing.
What?
Nothing. No, no, nothing. I just no, nope. No,
What?
you know, we weren't playing D&D, and somehow you
What?
still did. All right, if I check the open chat right now, all right, cool. There's.
What?
You were still able to break me on a D&D night, even though we didn't play.
Yeah.
Also, Spring, can I say one thing before we go?
Yes.
I am a little bit disappointed that no grilled cheese was brought up tonight, and it's too late now.
I mean, it just happened.
No.
We didn't have to. We made you do it.
No, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way.
No, it too late. It just worked that way.
No, it doesn't work that way.
This is the reality we're looking at. It literally just happened. Mm-hmm.
Nope. Nope. I will say though, Sprig, if you have a couple hours and whatnot, and if you don't end up playing Spirit Island, did you know that For the King 2 beta test is out right now?
No.
Oh, maybe that's something you could check out.
We still had my RPG to go through though. If you wanted to hang out and do a bit of that.
Oh, if it's getting to the time, I actually have to help someone move in the morning early.
Oh.
So I was going to be heading off either way after we were done talking about, well, around this time actually.
Oh.
I only agreed to help because, well, we had no D&D tonight.
I very much do want to discuss the RPG with you, but I think that deserves its own stream.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That is something that I want to do and I am excited to do, though.
Yeah. But all right, I definitely appreciate it. I think this was actually really fun.
It was a delight.
Yay.
Yay! Now,
I mean,
quick.
I'm hanging out with Kashak and Sprig. Of course it's a delight. You both are wonderful.
Me wonderful? Nah.
You too.
Nope.
Oh my goodness, bananas.
See, I'm not wonderful. I'm a gremlin. And actually, I am. No, I kind of do want to get revenge on you, Jade, a little bit for all the time you broke me. So if I ever get to play on you, I'm going full gremlin mode. I hope you know this. You think my Pathfinder one-shot character was anything? Nah, you've not seen nothing yet.
Rawr. Rawr.
Rawr.
I want to play a game in a non-standard system.
Dungeon World.
I mean, if I get to full playtest ability, I'd love to run my system for you.
Heck yeah.
I did one playtest of it a while back. It went okay, but it was a very small scale playtest.
Next week is all Go Godot Game Jam judging, but the week after that, I would be delighted to do a stream about your game.
Okay.
Because I also have some time in between games, since I finished both of my games before the Game Jam judging. Which is awesome.
Nice.
But you are both wonderful. And any final thoughts before I close out my stream?
What? Why is it
Agreed.
fresh?
Agreed. 100% agreed.
No, I'm kind of good.
All right.
As a Sprig is getting taken out, off screen.
For the 420 bits. I need to fix that because I have no idea why it's that fish, and that fish is way too loud.
All right. Cheers, friends.
See you.
Bye.